You might think America's most famously vigorous president survived on nothing but raw meat and black coffee, but Theodore Roosevelt's actual eating habits were far more complicated than his Rough Rider image suggests. Sure, he preached the strenuous life and charged up San Juan Hill, but when it came to his dinner plate, TR had some seriously indulgent habits that would make modern nutritionists wince. From his childhood battles with illness to his White House banquets, Roosevelt's relationship with food reveals a man caught between self-discipline and shocking excess. The childhood invalid who became a food warrior. According to multiple biographers, young Theodore Roosevelt was a sickly child plagued by debilitating asthma. His father famously told him, "You have the mind, but you have not the body, and without the help of the body, the mind cannot go as far as it should." This kicked off TR's lifelong obsession with physical fitness, but it also established some interesting eating patterns. Roosevelt's response was to build himself up through exercise, fresh air, and yes, eating. His childhood diaries mention consuming raw eggs, milk, and whatever his doctors recommended to put meat on his bones. The frail boy who could barely breathe would transform himself into a man who bragged about his physique. But that transformation came with a cost to his waistline later in life. Breakfast fit for a bull moose. Roosevelt's typical breakfast was, in a word, massive. Former White House staff reported that the president would sit down to a morning meal that included stacks of pancakes, fried chicken, hominy, rolls with butter, several cups of coffee loaded with sugar, and fresh fruit. This wasn't a special occasion spread. This was Tuesday. As it turns out, TR believed that breakfast was the most important meal for a man of action. He'd often finish eating and immediately head out for a morning horseback ride or boxing session. The man had energy to burn, and he fueled it accordingly. Is anyone else suddenly exhausted just reading about that meal? The coffee addiction. Nobody talks about now. Here's where things get interesting. According to his son Archie, Roosevelt's coffee cup was more in the nature of a bathtub. The president would drink coffee throughout the day, and not just any coffee, extremely strong coffee, loaded with as many as 7 lumps of sugar per cup. One White House servant recalled that Roosevelt would drain cup after cup during meetings, barely pausing between refills. His doctor eventually tried to get him to cut back, warning about the effects on his heart. Roosevelt's response, he switched to a slightly smaller cup. Clearly, the man was not interested in moderation when it came to his caffeine fix. Meat, meat, and more meat. For what it's worth, Roosevelt was an unapologetic carnivore. Lunch and dinner typically featured multiple meat courses. Former White House chef Henry Pinard noted that a typical Roosevelt dinner might include oysters, soup, fish, at least 2 meat dishes, often beef and game, vegetables, salad, and dessert. The president particularly loved game meat from his hunting expeditions: venison, elk, bear. If Roosevelt shot it, he wanted to eat it. He once served possum at a White House dinner, much to the horror of some guests. Who can blame him for wanting to enjoy the fruits of his hunts? Well, probably the guests who had to eat possum. The sweet tooth, hidden behind the Rough Rider image. Here's something that might surprise you. Theodore Roosevelt had a serious weakness for sweets. According to multiple accounts, he would devour desserts with the same enthusiasm he brought to trust-busting. Pies, cakes, puddings, ice cream. Roosevelt rarely met a dessert he didn't like. White House records show that his favorite was peach cobbler with vanilla ice cream. He'd often request seconds, and sometimes thirds. For a man who preached self-control and the strenuous life, his lack of restraint at the dessert course was notable. Perhaps all that physical activity gave him license to indulge. Or perhaps, like many of us, he just really liked pie. The formal dinners that went on forever. State dinners under Roosevelt were legendary for their length and excess. According to newspaper accounts from the era, these meals could include 10 or more courses and last for several hours. Roosevelt would sit through it all, engaging in animated conversation between bites. The menus from these events read like culinary marathons: multiple soups, fish courses, meat courses, vegetables, salads, cheese courses, and elaborate desserts. And this was considered normal for the time. The Edwardian era loved its excess, and Roosevelt, despite his outdoor image, fully participated in this aspect of upper-class life. His bizarre eating speed. Now, that sounds like someone who'd savor all that food, right? Wrong. Multiple dinner guests commented on Roosevelt's habit of eating at an alarmingly fast pace. He would shovel food into his mouth while talking, barely pausing to chew. His friend Owen Wister wrote that dining with Roosevelt was like watching a machine in operation. The president would finish his plate long before anyone else and then sit there, drumming his fingers, waiting for others to catch up. Table manners apparently took a backseat to efficiency. The camping trip. Diet. However, when Roosevelt went on his famous camping and hunting trips, his diet changed dramatically. On expeditions, he'd eat whatever was available: hardtack, beans, coffee, and whatever game he could shoot. Former Rough Rider companions recalled that TR never complained about the simple food, even seemed to relish the contrast with White House dining. These trips represented Roosevelt's ideal, the simple, vigorous life he was always preaching about. No 7-course meals, no sugar-laden coffee in bathtub-sized cups. Just a man, nature, and basic sustenance. Of course, he always returned to Washington and his indulgent ways soon enough. The health consequences. Nobody wanted to discuss. As it turns out, all this eating caught up with Roosevelt. By the time he left office in 1909, he'd gained significant weight. Photos from his later years show a man who'd filled out considerably from his Rough Rider days. His doctors warned him repeatedly about his diet and weight, but Roosevelt largely ignored them. During his famous 1913 to 1914 expedition to Brazil, the River of Doubt expedition, Roosevelt's weight and poor diet contributed to health problems that nearly killed him. He contracted malaria and a serious leg infection, and his body, weakened by years of overindulgence, struggled to fight back. He lost 57 pounds on that trip, but the damage was done. The alcohol question. Unsurprisingly, Roosevelt drank alcohol, though perhaps less than you'd expect for a man of his era and class. He enjoyed wine with dinner and the occasional whiskey, but multiple sources confirm he was never a heavy drinker. In fact, he was known to water down his wine, much to the amusement of visiting European dignitaries. That said, he wasn't a teetotaler either. White House records show regular orders for champagne, wine, and spirits. Roosevelt simply preferred moderation in this one area of his life, which makes his lack of restraint with food all the more interesting. What he refused to eat. For all his adventurous eating, Roosevelt did have limits. According to his wife Edith, he despised mushrooms and would not touch them. He also disliked overly fancy French cuisine, preferring straightforward American cooking despite the formal French-influenced menus served at state dinners. Interestingly, Roosevelt also avoided certain game meats he considered unsporting to hunt. He never served rabbit at the White House, reportedly because he found hunting rabbits beneath a true sportsman. The man had principles, they just didn't extend to portion control. The daily routine that enabled the excess. Here's the thing, Roosevelt got away with eating massive amounts because he maintained an incredibly active lifestyle. His daily routine included early morning horseback rides, boxing sessions, long walks, swimming in the Potomac, yes, even in winter, and endless physical activity with his children. Former aide William Loeb calculated that Roosevelt burned an extraordinary number of calories each day through sheer constant motion. The president was famous for never sitting still, pacing during meetings, and engaging in what he called vigorous exercise at every opportunity. Without this activity level, his eating habits would have been unsustainable much earlier in life. The legacy of TR's appetite. Whatever the case may be, Roosevelt's eating habits paint a complex picture. Here was a man who preached self-discipline and the strenuous life, yet couldn't resist seconds of peach cobbler. An outdoorsman who loved simple camp food but also hosted 10-course state dinners. A fitness enthusiast whose weight ballooned after leaving office. In many ways, Roosevelt's relationship with food mirrors his entire personality. Energetic, excessive, contradictory, and utterly American. He wanted it all, the adventure and the indulgence, the vigor and the dessert cart, And for most of his life, his sheer force of will and physical activity allowed him to have both. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more videos about presidential eating habits are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.